Hello everyone, and welcome to 2005-2006 Ford GT Supercar Parts and Maintenance. My name's Scott Minch, and I'll be your host for the next few minutes. We've put together some very informative videos on the unique parts that make up the 2005-2006 Ford GT Supercar, along with some videos on simple maintenance and repairs that you as a Ford GT owner can do at home. So watch for our upcoming videos, and let's get started. In Chapter 1, today we're going to talk about something pretty basic on all the engines, is the valve covers and the coil covers on the Ford GT engine. Ford Motor Company has had the dual overhead cam 4.6 and 5.4. These engines actually started back in 1993 with a Mark 8 Lincoln, and there's been many changes to the engine ever since. Ford Racing even sells crinkle blue valve covers, very similar to this, and even Ford Motor Company has offered the blue crinkle valve covers starting in 2011 on the GT500 Shelby Mustangs, the 5.4, and then later in 2013 on the 5.8. While they all look similar and they're all the same color, only the Ford GT valve cover is unique to this engine by itself. The first unique part to these valve covers, if you notice, there's no oil fill provision on the valve cover itself. The oil fill on a Ford GT engine is in the reservoir tank due that the engine has a dry sump oiling system and holds the oil off-site from the engine over to the side. Oil fill is through the tank itself, not through the valve cover. The other thing I want you to look at is, if you notice, the PCV system is a little bit different on these valve covers. The locations are pretty much different than any other valve cover made. That also makes them unique to the Ford GT application. One other thing is the Ford GT Romeo niche signature plate on the valve cover itself. While several of the valve covers have plates on them from the Romeo niche line, and the Shelby, the later Shelby's 07 and up, has a rectangular pocket for the signature plate. Only the Ford GT uses this almost perfectly rectangular plate for the Ford GT engine badge. This is the only valve cover and the only badge that fits in this recessed pocket. Also, Ford has come up with some beautiful Power by Ford cast aluminum coil covers. We're going to get into the valve covers and the coil covers and show you the differences in these units as well. Right now we're going to show you a set of Ford GT Supercar valve covers off the engine and a few things that make them unique that we just spoke about. The valve cover is pretty basic, like all the 4V valve covers that Ford makes. You've got your 8 bolt holes, and then you've got the extra 2 here, which makes 10 attachment bolts. In the bolt holes, Ford simply uses a rubber Teflon gasket grommet with a steel spacer. We'll simply just pop in place. No sealant necessary. Same way on the back side. This is your spark plug holes in the cylinder head. These line up with those. They seal those to the head themselves. They use a simple big O-ring rubber Teflon gasket. These simply sit on, pop in place, just like that. The last gasket is what we call a racetrack gasket. Fits in this dado track on the bottom of the valve cover. All the dual overhead cam 4-valve valve covers use a gasket similar to that. In fact, they are all the same, as a matter of fact, except for the earlier Mark 8s. Those are a little bit different. However, there is a left and a right racetrack gasket. It's a neoprene gasket. Make sure you get the right gasket the first time. And all you do is you lay it on there, line it up with the curvatures in the valve covers, and you just simply snap it in. Do not pull on the neoprene gasket. You will stretch it, and time you get down to the end, you're going to have gasket hanging out here that has nowhere to go. So simply push it in. Do not pull or stretch the gasket itself. One thing I did want to show you today as well, where there's some confusion in the Ford industry, is the hump in the valve cover in the front. If you notice, the Ford GT uses a pretty good sized hump. This is for the camshaft sprocket on the dual overhead cam heads. They have a big chain sprocket in the front of the engine. And the Ford GT takes the big sprocket. In 2007, Shelby cars came with a different valve cover that used a small sprocket for the chain drive. Part of the reason Ford did that actually, They used a small sprocket so they could make a smaller hump valve cover to fit in the chassis of a Mustang. What happens is people try to use the Shelby valve covers on a big sprocket engine. Your earlier Cobra motors, Mach 1, Marauder, all use a big sprocket. You cannot run the Shelby valve covers with the small hump with a big sprocket. You will end up machining the bottom of the valve cover and possibly even breaking the valve cover. So there are some differences right there. If you look at the hump in the valve covers, it's quite a bit different. You can run the big sprocket valve covers on all the engines, but you can only run the Shelby small hump valve covers on engines with small chain sprockets. Just keep that in mind. Last thing we're going to look at is the Ford coil covers. Ford did a beautiful job with the design. It really is a throwback vintage look. Powered by Ford. These are cast aluminum, really nice piece. And they're marked right hand and left hand. So you can't really mess these up too bad installing them. They too also have a neoprene gasket that goes in a dado track under the coil cover with an opening in the gasket and an opening in the back of the coil cover. That's for the wiring harness that plugs onto the coil packs under the coil cover. The harness comes out of this notch, so just line up your notch of the gasket with the notch in the coil cover. These will fit most of the dual overhead cam 4-valve engines that Ford manufactures today, other than the 5-liter Coyote. They do not fit that. One last thing we want to talk about on the coil covers. Back in the day in 05, and actually the engineering took place in 03, we're going back, this is 2015, so it's a few years back. A lot of these tend to look like they are corroding. They look like they've got salt, like white chalky marks. Some of them have black under there, and it looks like the coil cover is dirty or it's corroding. Neither one is actually true. Ford used a clear coat, powder coat back in the day. And what has happened, I've talked with the manufacturer on these coil covers here in Michigan. What happened is that this is actually trapped gas under the clear coat. And unfortunately, there's no way to get that out of there without stripping all the clear coat off. Redoing that might happen again, we're not sure. We've polished these, we've painted these. You can do quite a bit with the coil covers to really dress up your engine. But that is not corrosion. It is just a trapped gas process. Today's process is much cleaner. They've come up with a new way of doing it, and you don't get this process and this look anymore. So unfortunately, they do, even brand new out of the box, you will get some odd looking stuff under the clear coat. It's just part of life on these coil covers. Thanks again for watching today. Watch for our upcoming chapters on upcoming parts, maintenance and repairs on your Ford GT Supercar. Thank you.